today I am going to work some more on the rose. One question that I had earlier was about whether or not the pencil lines that I've drawn on here will come off after we've painted. And my answer to that is that mostly. I can, and some of these are a bit dark here, so I'm going to come in and I've got one of these kneaded erasers, and let's just knead it a little tiny bit more, get it nice and flexible here and as clean as possible. It's one I've been using for a while, so it's got quite a bit of color to it. So anyway, I can come in here, and as you perhaps can see, I can remove a fair amount of these lines. I can't get them gone 100%, but I can lighten them considerably. And now, while it's totally dry, is the only time you want to do it. It has to be absolutely, completely 100% dry. And I'm going to even out here, I'm going to just lighten those up a little bit. Places where I don't need them anymore because I've gotten the paint in there. So just lighten those all a little bit. Let's just lighten this out here just a wee titch. When I come in and do my darks, that will come right up against those dark lines, and most of them will disappear at that point because they'll get hidden underneath of that dark painting. Okay, so that's much better. Now, my next thing I want to do on this, I want to go ahead and get some of the pinks. So some of these pinks that are happening up here on the edge of those petals. And when I do, I don't want to lose this little white light line that's right on the edge. And part of that pink is going to show that those petals are rounded. So we have to do a graded wash where it's darkest in the middle and then lightens out toward the edges gradually so that it looks like a rounded edge. And then other places like here where there's a valley back behind, there's a deep space back behind, that's a really hard edge. And so that's not all soft and rounded. So let's go ahead and work on that a little bit. I also have to decide, am I using Opera Pink? And let's just get some of the Opera out here. So this is Opera Pink. It's a very bright pink. Now, my other choice for this would be my Quinacridone Rose, which that's dirty in there. I need to clean that a little bit more. Shouldn't be that purple. And remember, we've been using it for making purple and gray, and so it's gotten a little bit dirty. So let's try this now. That's better. So which do we think is going to be the best here? Do we need a combination of the two? I can get a little bit darker with the Quinacridone Rose, and let's just see what this so which did I decide that I want to use here? You know, I'm actually liking both of them to a certain degree. So let me start with the Opera Pink, and then I can come in and do a little bit darker using the Quinacridone Rose. So let me start up in the top up here. Now, as I put this on, I like putting paint sort of in the middle of the area that's going to get the color. And then dampening my brush, rinsing my brush, drying it just a little bit, and then I'm going to pick up the edge of what I just put down and pull it down one direction, and it's going to come in here a fair ways, probably about to there. And then before anything starts drying, I need to pick up the other side of this and pull it up the other direction. And if it feels like I'm getting the paint too even, I rinse my brush out a little bit so that I can have a thinner layer. And now if it feels like that needs to go a little bit darker, I can come in with a little bit of Quinacridone Rose. Yeah, let's just throw a little Quinacridone Rose in here on that damp surface that I had and move that around a little bit. And it feels like that dark needs to go up there just a little bit. This top, I need to control that just a tiny bit more there. Come back in with a damp brush, not a wet brush, a damp brush, so that it only moves it around a little bit. Okay, so that's that one. Now, so this is my opera that we're playing with. We want just a little bit down in through this petal here. Rinse my brush, dry it halfway, pick up the edge of this and feed it down. Pick up the top edge and feed it up. And I'm working my way down so that my hands won't get in on top of this. I'm actually almost tempted to go back into the quinacridone rose and pick up a little bit of the dirty of the quinacridone rose so I have a slight purple tinge to it. Let's try this. I want to take a little bit off of this one spot because it doesn't feel like it should have had as much on there. Now let's soften this out to the top. I'm painting with my my pad flat at this point, so it doesn't have a definite run one way or the other. And then I can just take a touch of the opera and just pop it in there. Let that one dry. And this one feels like it should be more like opera out here. If we want to hold hard edges between things, I can't touch one wet surface to another. So I'm doing one petal at a time and sort of bouncing back and forth with these so that I always have a dry space between what I'm doing. So then I can paint around that guy, and this can come right on down and paint into here. This needs a little more pink there, and maybe a little bit of that slightly purpley shade, a little bit darker right in underneath of there. Oops, got it a bit too dark. Now let's come back in right now while it's still damp and pick a little bit of that paint out of there. It's so easy with this delicate pink to get it a little too strong. So now let's see, where else can we play without, I can come over into here. Right back quickly on top of there so that that doesn't dry, and just soften the edge of that, and it comes right down into that petal there. Soften the edge at the top, but try and still leave a little white line at the very top. And we can have a little bit of pink right out in there. Okay, so this one I should be able to paint. You know, actually that's dry up in there. We can paint here. It's a very delicate little spot, and it actually gets a bit darker in the middle of it. I'm painting with a number 8 brush. It's got a good tip, so I can still control this. So I want to soften the edge of that. And then there's another one here. A little bit darker right there. Pull the the edge of that. Okay. Now, let's see, this here has a little more of a purplish tinge to it, so I think it's, yeah, it was dry right there. And I'm going to take just a touch of blue onto here, make that a little more purple, and now let's softly lift the edge of that, get that to be a soft grade. Get this to be a soft grade. And when I do, I'm lightening it just a little bit because it was a bit dark. Let's thin this edge just a little more. Just coming back in and picking a little more paint off of there to thin it as we make that a grade. When I come in to do that darker in the valleys, it's going to make some of this stand out a little bit more. And this area right here, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I want to just take a little bit of that blue in on there to make that a touch more purplish. This is sort of concentration stuff that can be difficult. Now here I erased part of my line, but that pink is only on this edge right here. There's a little turned edge that's pink. And I want to just very gently soften the edge of those. Okay, I think that's good. A little bit of pink here. And now this once again turns just slightly more purple, so add a little bit of blue into there. I'm using cobalt blue for that blue, just to sort of make it a soft purple. And then it's a little more pinkish as it gets right down in here. And then this is fairly pink right in here. It circles around, and then there's a light lip on that, and it gradually, I want to soften this here as it comes into this yellow area. That right up to there. That's pretty good there. Okay. And then let's shift back over to this other side. And there's a white edge on that that's got a hard edge. It's not going to be softened because it's a turned petal there. That's going to come right out to this edge. Maybe a little bit darker right on that edge. And then I need to soften this back side but leave the front relatively hard. Just a damp brush, soften that down. And this feels like this needs to come out. These edges become pretty important. So just a hint of pink right here. And then let's soften both edges of that because I don't want that to be a hard line there. We had a place down in here where there was white that I lost, and I might be able to lift that now. So let's see, we have some more pink to do over to this other side. This petal right here comes up, And it's a little bit darker. There's a white edge on it, but then it's a little bit darker than what's behind it, and actually got a little touch of purple to it. So let's just put some purple in there. And then pull this pink down this way just a little bit more, and yeah, that can stay dark out to there. I'm really having to look very closely at this photograph as I work, because there's so many little details, little subtle details on how this works through here. Of course, sometimes it might be slightly changed, but we just have to sort of swing with those changes and hope that they're going to work okay. So I'm going to have some things that are sort of subtle that aren't quite what I'm seeing in the photograph, but I need to just sort of say, okay, that petal, that flower, it doesn't have to be 100% like the photograph, as long as it still has the feeling of the rose. So if I've got a petal a little too big or a little out of place, I can ignore that and just say it doesn't matter, because it doesn't. So let's get a little more of this opera pink. Now this petal right here comes in underneath of here. This is one that's not the same as my photograph. And yeah, we need some of that quinacridone rose mixed in with this. Rinse this and quickly get in here and get this little line pulled. There's some lighter places on this petal, is one reason why I needed to sort of stop. And let's see, what does it do underneath of here? And then it's quite a bit darker in this shadow area underneath. So I could drop a little bit more color right in there. And we can come back and do another layer in that later. Now this is maybe a little bit too dark right here. It lightens up on that corner. So let's just lighten that out. Now what was this? We have a piece of pink in the shadow here. Hint of pink down in here. The edges of that, and that was that. A little bit of pink right back behind here, and then I think we're pretty close to having all of our pink in. Back here, I can come around and have a little bit more pink right around here. Careful about overdoing it, soften it down. Ooh, I don't like this hard dark edge on this. I think I'm okay, as long as I come in with a damp, just a damp brush. And then I probably have to work this whole area a little bit. I don't like how that stayed so dark on the edge there, so I'm just trying to pick that edge up and off of there. Okay, now let's see what we can do about lifting some of this area here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I might be able to use a little Mr. Clean Magic Eraser in there if I have to, but just dampening it and rubbing with my brush can get most of it. Yeah, that's much better. Let's try it again just a little bit. If I were going to use Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, I got to be sure I have a nice fresh piece of it so that I don't get something else on here, because I want to get that right back as close to white as we can. Okay, I'm going to let this sit for a few minutes to dry, and then we'll come back and work on this some more. Painting like this, we have many choices about where to work next, because we're just doing it piece by piece. So it's not like we're doing an overall wash and then we're having to work that quickly. We're working up a piece of it and then working up another piece of it. but I am feeling like it would be helpful for me to see a little bit about what's going to happen in that background back there. So what I think I'm going to do next is actually put a little bit of the background green in here just to get a sense of what's going to happen with it. Now I have a Holbein's leaf green, which is this very almost violent green, which could be quite useful for the leaves, these leaves here that are sort of a light green. And I think that might look interesting with the pink. I just need to be sure that that's going to be dark enough. And then that along with sap green. So sap green working with that. And then we're going to be going into some even darker greens in places where we're going to get dark back behind some of this as I build that up. But we'll start with this very light yellowy green and some of the sap green, and that'll at least give us a sense of what's going to happen in through there. There's also a red stem. Interesting. But it's not bright red. I can put it in afterwards. Okay, so let's do a little bit of this. So these leaves here, let's just get a sense of those colors here. And I'm not worried about getting it exact on those leaves because we're going to, like with the other painting, come in and do some negative painting. What I do need to be very exact with is when it touches this flower. So at that point, I need to find the edge of my flower and paint that very precisely. But this other green, it can go on beyond where that's going to be. And up in here, be very careful that I get the sense of that flower. And then that's going to shift into more of a sap green as it works its way up into here. Still keeping it on the light side, just like we did before, that none of this is going to be too bright yet. Just getting a sense of the colors that are going to happen in here. And then that's going to be going into a darker green in between there. And we actually have some white flowers behind back there. I don't know how much of that we want to keep. There's a stem that I've got drawn. Oh yes, I like to just keep that little bit of white there. That's lovely. And then come back, let's get a little more of this yellowy color. And I can stop at that stem. That's an easy place for me to stop. So this is just like before. It's just an underwash to give me a sense of what's going to happen with the painting later. And we'll work on that background more, develop it more. Maybe this leaf can get a little bit more color to it. So just playing around with that a little bit. As we come in here, this is very important. Now this is a little darker green in here. Very important that I get the edge of this the way I want it. So I'm finding the shape of that edge and painting it, and then quickly coming back and filling behind there. This is going to give us a much better feel for what the shape of this flower is and how those lights work off into the background. This is mostly sap green over here. Maybe we can let this be even darker right there just to see. And I'm going to do the same thing. Let's just drop a little bit darker right into there. So we're coming right up to that pencil line, because when I do, then that pencil line disappears. Isn't that nice? So maybe there's some light spaces back in there. Some of that's going to go even darker eventually. Grab this quickly. If I don't, yeah, I will have a hard line there. We're now getting into where we need some of this more yellowy green. If I do it relatively thin, that yellow green's going to get almost a yellow glow to it. It's interesting how that happens as it dries. We can shape that into other things later. And don't try and get too detailed here yet. We're just wanting to get a little road map going. Making a few light and dark spaces, but not trying to get too detailed with them yet. And then we go back out into sap green and darker places out here. Leave a little bit of light behind. It's sort of nice to have some lighter spaces back in there. And then let's see, down in here we go back into a bit more of a sap green. And I have another branch drawn here, so this might be a good place for me to stop. I'm not sure that I've got the bottom of this all defined, and now I can say I want this a little deeper. Yeah, that felt better, a little bit deeper there. So this is what I do my final definition of the outside of those edges of those leaves with. So I've got to be careful that I don't do too much of this until I'm ready to define those. And are we or aren't we? You know, I feel like I need to have some of this. Okay, that's not going to be, let me just put a little touch of sort of pink into there, because you don't want that bright. But you want it light, but not bright. This is going to be more of this yellowy green. And I can come in with a little bit darker, and yes, this was supposed to be a leaf right here. I'm really defining the edge of that with that dark. And then quickly coming back in, pulling that off of there. Maybe a little bit more of this light color can come in on top of that. We can go darker with all of this later. Just, there's a shape of a rose down in here I sort of like. Let's see, which way does it go? It goes that way. Okay, so that can stay there. A little bit of white there. And maybe another little rose shape, roundish shape down in there. That leaf is fairly distinct, so I'm going to leave a little white right beside it so it'll stay that way. And just let those sort of bleed into that wetness that's there. There's a leaf there, but it's sort of soft. Oops. It's okay. Got a little bit of a darker side to it. We can do more with that later. Now if I want to keep this leaf pretty sharp, I can leave an edge on it there that's light. So part of what gives the whiteness to our rose is going to be this darker background, and but it also needs to be, you know, broken up and delicate so that it feels like there's sunlight back in there. So just take that right off that edge. Maybe feeling of another rose back in there. White's right at that very edge there. I think I now need to stop on this for the moment. This is going to go much darker. Back in there. But let me come back and deal with that later, I think. Okay, I'm going to stop at this point. This has got to dry, and then I can come back in and start working in the interior of the flower, and then come back and work some more of that, the background. But I think this is all that's going to happen for now. We'll see you the next time through.